the crowd froze. Only a second ago, the square in front of the royal palace was full of voices, laughter, and cameras clicking. But now there is not a sound. Only a ringing silence filled with a heavy, almost physically tangible tension. People could not believe what had just happened. Among them was a tourist who was overcome with fear. His heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed like it was about to burst out of his chest. His arm, so confident a moment ago, now hung powerlessly along his body. He wanted to take a step back, to dissolve into the crowd, to make time rewind. But the guard moved. Not abruptly, not aggressively, just one step forward. But it was enough. His black bear helmet cast a long shadow, and a wet spot on his immaculate red uniform glistened dimly in the sun. Water was still dripping from his uniform, falling onto the stone pavement. His eyes were invisible, but the tourist felt that he was looking right at him. And then he spoke. "Have you made your choice?" What happened next shocked everyone. The morning over London began calmly. The air was fresh after the night's rain, and the sun, though not too warm, was golden on the roof of Buckingham Palace. Tourists had already filled the square in front of the main gate, setting up cameras and preparing their phones for pictures. Max Weldon was among them. 27 years old, American, blogger. Keeping his subscribers' attention has become his only job and also his biggest fear. The world was changing rapidly, and if you don't generate content, you are simply forgotten. Today he planned to make a viral video. The audience needs more shock, his friend and cameraman Liam told him yesterday, the old formula, something unexpected to trigger a wave of comments. "What do you think of the Royal Guard?" Max immediately agreed, and now he stood in the center of the crowd, looking at those who were to be the target of his provocation. The guardsmen in red uniforms stood at the gate, stretched out in an impeccable stance. They looked like real statues, living monuments to British discipline. Max hummed. What could be easier than getting one of them to react? His camera was already rolling. It was live. Dozens of comments. "Are you serious? That's illegal. LOL, come on." The adrenaline was pumping. Max realized that if he wanted an explosive video, he had to do more than just wave his arms in front of the guard. He took a step forward, boldly approaching one of them. The guard was tall. Too tall, in fact. His bear helmet added a few more centimeters to his height, and Max suddenly felt less confident. But there was nowhere to retreat. The audience was waiting. The first attack was with words. "Hey, buddy, what if I do this?" Max waved his hand sharply in front of the guardsman's face. Zero reaction. The crowd around him became noisy. Someone laughed. Someone started filming. The second attack was physical contact. Max brazenly snapped his fingers near his ear. And again, nothing. Not a single movement. The guard stood as if carved in stone. This made Max swallow nervously. It seemed that this man was not just standing there. He existed in a separate dimension where Max did not exist. The third attack is an ultimatum. "Okay, Mr. Robot," Max said hoarsely, pulling out his water bottle. "Let's see if you can ignore this." The whispering in the crowd subsided. People stopped laughing. Some even started to walk away. Max raised the bottle over the guard. "So it's your choice, my friend. If you react, then you are not so untouchable after all. If you don't react, then you're just..." And he tipped the water over. Just for a few seconds, the silence exploded with 100 voices. Someone shouted, "Are you an idiot?" The woman covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes rounded with shock. And the guardsman, he took a step forward. Just one step. But it was the hardest step anyone had ever seen in their lives. Max felt cold needles run through his skin. Everything had gone wrong. Not at all. When the guard took that one step forward, something in the crowd changed. What was just a silly prank for social media a minute ago suddenly became a dangerous moment that spun out of control. Max stood there, unmoving. His brain hadn't yet realized what was happening, but his heart was already pounding like a man about to face an abyss. The guard was looking directly at him. Although his eyes were hidden by the shadow of his bear helmet, Max could almost physically feel that look, like a cold blade touching his throat, leaving him no chance to escape. His red uniform was wet. Water was still dripping off it, falling in dark drops on the stone pavement. But even his ruined uniform did not shake his haughty posture. Max involuntarily took a step back. He had always thought that these guardsmen were just part of the show, that they never reacted, never broke their role. But now he knew he was wrong. Still silent, The guardsman took a second step forward, and this time he did not stop. He moved slowly, precisely, as if measuring every centimeter of space between him and the intruder. He did not take out his rifle, did not shout, did not push. But it was clear, Max had crossed a line that no one had the right to touch. "Dude, get out of there," Liam shouted hoarsely, still holding the phone. But Max couldn't move. For the first time in his life, he realized that his courage was fake. He was used to living in a world where he could press pause, where there was always a second chance, where he was in control. But here he had no control over anything. The guardsman stopped close to him. Still not a word. Only his presence was heavy, like an invisible sentence. Max felt his palms sweat. He didn't know what to do. He didn't even know if he could be arrested. What was going on? Was it just an act of intimidation? Or are there really consequences? The crowd, which had been filming and laughing a minute ago, now felt real fear. People began to back away, creating an empty space around them. Max opened his mouth to say something, but he didn't have time. "On your knees." These two words knocked all the oxygen out of him. His voice was calm, cold, clear. The crowd froze. Max turned pale, feeling his throat tighten. This wasn't a choice. It was an order. And he knew that his next action would determine everything. How would it end? Max didn't move. The blood was pounding in his temples. Everything seemed to slow down, like in a movie before the final moment. The crowd around him held its breath. People were waiting to see what would happen next. The guardsman did not repeat the order. He didn't need to. Max felt it on the level of instincts. Either he would obey now, or the consequences would be much more serious than he could have imagined. His knees were trembling. "Dude, just do it," Liam whispered sharply, still holding the phone, although he wasn't filming anymore. His voice sounded dull, as if he didn't believe it was happening. But Max couldn't. How would it look? Would he, a popular blogger, kneel before a guard? His followers would never forget this humiliation. It would mean the end of his reputation, his career. And then the guard made another move. He slowly removed the white glove from his right hand. This gesture was almost theatrical. The hint was so obvious that no words were needed. If Max did not comply with the order, direct physical contact would follow. He will be put in his place. And this moment would be all over the news. He finally realized that this was not just a joke. It was a boundary that he had no right to cross. His body acted faster than his mind. Max dropped to his knees. At that moment, several things happened at once. Red Circle, the crowd exploded with noise. People started talking. Someone even took off his hat as a sign of respect. Red Circle, Liam abruptly turned off the broadcast. His face was pale. The guard took a step back. He said nothing more. He just looked down at him like a judge who had already passed a verdict. Max felt his heart falling into the void. He was humiliated. But worst of all, it was not an accident, but his own choice. And then he heard a metallic click. A new problem. Two figures in black uniforms appeared from behind the guardsman. The Royal Guard. And they were coming straight for him. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. Max felt it before he saw it. First, the metallic sound of handcuffs clicking in the hands of one of the guards. Then, the pressure of the crowd, which retreated, forming a free corridor. And a second later, a shadow fell over him. The guards were here. Black suits, stern faces, a minimum of emotion. They acted without further ado. They were used to such situations and knew how to handle them. Max could barely breathe. He had to get to his feet. His body acted even before he understood the order. He stood up, but his knees felt like cotton wool. "Names?" one of the guards asked, in a low voice, as if he was talking not to a person but to a case that needed to be recorded in a protocol. Max was silent. He realized what he had just done. This is no longer just a video for social media. This is an official offense. He could be deported. His name could be blacklisted. He could be banned from entering Britain. This is not part of the show. Name. The guard's voice changed. It was no longer a request, but a demand. Max. His own voice sounded foreign to him. Max Weldon. The guard looked at the other, and he scanned the passport Liam had already pulled out of his backpack in a panic. "American," he muttered. "A tourist. Nothing more." Max heard the verdict before it was even spoken. Nothing more. He would never be more than just another stupid tourist who decided to play with a tradition he didn't understand. "This is a criminal offense, sir. Do you realize the consequences?" A cold sweat pierced his body. He didn't know what to say. His life could change right now. The answer he gave would either save him or ruin everything forever. What would he say? Max felt the space shrinking around him. When the guard repeated the question, "Do you realize the consequences?" his brain seemed to simply refuse to work. He still could not accept what was happening. His hands were shaking. His knees felt like cotton wool. But he forced himself to keep a straight back, not to let them see fear. Although they had already seen everything. The guardsman stood next to him, as unmoved as ever. He didn't look at Max anymore. He had no need to. Max had destroyed himself. Round pushpin, what happens next? Red circle option 1, official accusation. Option 2, administrative fine, deportation. Option 3, or the crowd froze. People were waiting for what would happen next. Would they handcuff him? Or would they drag him across the square like a criminal? Max caught Liam's eye. He wasn't filming, he was just looking, and there was only one thing in his eyes. "I told you not to do that." One of the guards twirled the documents in his hands, as if he was weighing a decision. And then there was a pause. 5 seconds of silence. And then, "You are to leave the territory immediately." "What?" Max blinked. "What?" "You're not being arrested," the second guard clarified, "but your visa will be reviewed." That meant one thing. Red circle, he would be kicked out of the country. He could be banned from entering for years to come. And most importantly, he would never be just a tourist again. His name is now in the database. Max felt everything break inside him. He tried to say something, a joke, an excuse, anything. But the words didn't matter. He was pushed forward, pointing to the exit from the square. The crowd parted. And as he walked, head down, he heard only the heavy sound of the guardsman's footsteps behind him, returning to his position. And this sound meant the end. The game is over. The Royal Guard is not a show. And Max Weldon is no longer a guest in this country. Conclusion. He was playing. But traditions are not for playing. Final.